What is the number one reason that is preventing your growth? Love it or hate it, it's you.
Charles Gaudet is the founder and CEO of Predictable Profits, a methodology he built to help 7- and 8-figure businesses escape the feast or famine cycle and create consistent month-over-month growth.
We got to figure out how you do what you do. We got to put this into a system. We got to put this into a framework.
He's worked with hundreds of established companies across revenue architecture, sales process engineering, and building systems that scale far beyond the founder.
Well, I hate to break it to you, but you can't do marketing. Nobody can do marketing. Marketing is a function. It's a function of how you create, capture, and nurture demand. And so setup is the basis behind everything.
And he lives by this. Entrepreneurs who sell what they do compete on price. Entrepreneurs who sell how they do it differently lead the market.
But if you're not strategic, if you're average, if you're comfortable, if you do what you always do, you're going to be reduced to nothing more than word of mouth and referrals.
This conversation is about exactly that, how to scale.
Scale is all the ways between data intelligence, so you have zero guesswork. It's operations and systems.
How to lead.
Best feeling that I've ever felt as a business owner is when my team took it upon themselves to drive growth without having to come to me for permission or direction.
And how to build something that actually lasts.
That is what I call freedom as a business owner, when suddenly all the weight that you've carried on your shoulders for so long is now distributed and you have a whole team rowing in the same direction. Oh, that's magic.
Charles, I'm going to start with an easy one today, okay? By the end of this conversation, what is it that you want our audience to take away?
Oh, that's the easy one you're starting with, right?
Let's go.
That's perfect. Man, there's so many different angles that I could take with this. Narrowing it down to one will be the tough one, but right now, regardless of what business you're in, it doesn't matter if if you own an agency or you're an electrician or plumber, whatever it is. Every single business is being disrupted, and it's being disrupted by AI. And so, if anything, what I want people to do is I want them to wake up to the reality of what's going to happen and what is happening right now. In fact, every business has already been disrupted. They just don't realize that they've been disrupted, and they're pointing to things that are symptoms of something that goes much deeper. And so what I want to do is just open people up to the possibility that they are being disrupted and what needs to happen for them to remain relevant in 2026 and then the years thereafter.
That's great. Have not talked about that on this show yet. So I think there's going to be a lot of value there. I want to dig right into that. How have businesses been disrupted already, or what are some of the ways that you've seen?
Well, at a very simple level, if you look at your website traffic between December of 2024 and now where it is now in December 2025, on average, 60% of your website traffic has already gone down. And that's gone down because of AI overviews inside of Google. So Google's not showing your website to get people to click on it right off the bat. Instead, they're showing overviews and they're giving people answers. So that's number one. Number two, you're seeing an increase in usage of AI-based search engines, whether that's Perplexity, which is one of the greatest ones. So people are going to Perplexity and they'll say something like, best plumber in Jupiter, Florida, for example, or they're going to tools like Atlas, which is still not a lot of people are using it, but it's ChatGPT's default browser, and we're going to start seeing more significance there. Google right now, they have you're seeing AI overviews. I'm being told that it is on the map that by the end of the year, it's going to default to AI mode. And what all of this means is that when people are searching for you or your type of business, they're searching for you, and the output is going to be significantly different as they go through that in tomorrow's world than it is today. Like, for example, if you did a search and you were like, I'm going to search for a particular business. I'm going to look for, say, an electrician or a chiropractor or whatever that might be. You do the search, and you pull it up, and you're going to see a whole bunch of, company listings and some reviews. Now, what ends up happening is you do a search, and it turns around and it'll ask you some questions to get clarification of what it is, that particular type that you're looking for, the particular specialty that you're looking for. It'll do some research. It'll give you the top three. It'll tell you why it selected the top three. It'll ask you if it wants to make a recommendation for you, and it will just tell you this is the type of people. Not only that, it goes much deeper. Depending on the industry and the client, I've actually walked clients through where it said, this is what it is. This is how much you can expect to pay. Here's the positive reviews. Here's the negative reviews. This is some tips based on what we found online on how to negotiate with this person to get the lowest price. And it went all the way down that way. I mean, it's completely wild with what's happening right now.
That's really interesting. How does that affect like the traditional SEO or pay-per-click mindset that people have had for years when it comes to Google? It almost feels like these AI descriptions or generated responses will render those obsolete. Is that a fair thing to say?
So, well, SEO has changed completely.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the people who are practicing SEO right now are operating from a playbook that was really just built, that was fairly successful all the way up until maybe 2023 into 2024, and all of that just kind of flipped on its head.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's a lot more of like AEO, right, which is a lot different. And we can go into a deeper conversation, but that's where people's heads might explode because it is, a lot more complex. Simple when you really look at it, but it's, I'm going to throw terms that might give some people a headache.
Gotcha.
But the pay-per-click, what it's going to do is just change shape and change form, right? Like right now, obviously, it still has a place. It's still there. But at some point, there's rumor that ChatGPT is going to start doing paid advertising. And so, now you're going to want to look to do some paid advertising there. At Google, their advertising is going to change form. So you're going to want to do that. But I think what's even more important than all of that is what most people don't realize is that AI is fighting for relevancy. And here's what I mean by that. Like, AI really ultimately needs to survive in order for it to have a purpose. So that means that if I go to AI and I'm like, find me the best bike shop in the area, and it recommends Joe Nobody, and I go over to his house, I go over to the location in somebody's house, and and it's I have a bad experience, I'm going to turn around and be like, this is ridiculous. AI gave me bad advice. I'm not going to use AI anymore. And so that is bad for AI. So AI is fighting for relevancy. When you put an inquiry inside of AI, they need to turn around and deliver the best output that they possibly can. So in order to fight for relevance, they're going to turn around and they're going to say, okay, what has been said about this person in the reviews? Let's look at the reviews. Let's synthesize all the reviews. What have they said about this person? All the different review sites. It's one thing for you to say you're awesome. We want to hear what other people on other sites are saying about you. Let's take that information. Let's put it in. And this person, they might claim that they're the best, but what do we know about the people who are the best at something? They put out some thought leadership, right? They talk about it. They put out thought leadership and so forth, right? Typically, that's, the people are the best. So they're going to say, well, we know that. So let's figure out where their thought leadership is and how much they put out there. Are they putting out content on LinkedIn? I know for a fact AI is scraping your content that you put out on LinkedIn. I know for a fact it's scraping the content that you're putting out on Instagram. It's also going to YouTube, and it's pulling the content from YouTube and the transcripts. It's going on podcasts to see where have you spoken on podcasts, and it's pulling information from there. Reddit, though I'm not a huge fan of Reddit, it still goes ahead and it pulls from Reddit. Are you blogging and those articles? Are you pulling that from the blogging press? Do you have press, third-party endorsements and credibility? They're pulling that. So they're creating a whole expert profile on you. So then this way, when you turn around and go, I want the best, whatever that might be, now what they're doing is they have a full expert profile on you to be able to say, this is where what I believe is the best, and here's why. And then it goes a step deeper because I might say I want the best, but let's look at it from a situation that most people would be aware of. And let's talk about like the health industry, right?
Mhm.
And let's say, I've got I got a heart issue. And I say, I'm not just going to go out there and be like, I need the best doctor. Because they're going to turn around and go, okay, you want the best doctor? Here's some really, good people. And I'm like, well, I need the best doctor for my heart. And it's like, okay, best doctor for my heart. Well, they're not going to recommend a general practitioner. They're going to turn around and go, here's the best heart doctors. So when you understand the queries that their users are actually going to be entering into these tools, you're going to see natural bias going to those people who are going to niche to either a specific industry or niche to a very specific problem. So if somebody is saying, I have an issue with this problem and you're the best at this problem, you're going to get preference. If you say, I'm looking for the best in this geographic, and your niche is at geographic, fine. I am looking for the best in this demographic or whatever it might be, or in this industry, you're going to get the best. See, what we can look at in the next 2026 and beyond, and I had this confirmed with somebody that I spoke with who works at OpenAI. And I said, look, what I see is that there's going to be a massive K-shaped economy that's coming. And it's at one point, it was scary, admittedly, but then the more I looked into it, the more I got incredibly excited. There's going to be a massive advantage to the strategic entrepreneur, the strategic founder, the strategic CEO, and they're going to take an outsized share of the market in the industry. But if you're not strategic, if you're average, if you're comfortable, if you do what you always do, you're going to be reduced to nothing more than word of mouth and referrals. Mm-hmm. And you're going to struggle. Because when you look at this K-shape, on the upward swing are going to be all those people that have built the expert profile. They have optimized for AI. They've done all this stuff. They've niched the whole deal, everything that we're talking about and then more. They're going to take the lion's share. But everybody else, again, they're going to disappear. AI is not going to be showing this to them. Because if you're not if you don't have this expert, profile that they've consumed, if you don't have all these reviews, if you don't have the case studies, if you don't have this and that, they're not going to be like, I recommend this company, because they have no reason to recommend you. You can say you're the best, but everybody can say they're the best. You actually have to prove it. And then you prove it, and then they'll show it to you. But it's for the consumer, this is exciting, because as a consumer, you know that when AI recommends something, and it's getting more relevant, it's not right there yet, but it's getting more relevant. When AI recommends something to you, the probability of you having a positive response is going to be great. So as a consumer, this is going to be better. As a business owner, that means, damn, I better get my act together, because I used to be able to fudge it and put up a website and say I'm really awesome and have my friends write me recommendations and everything else. But now AI is getting sophisticated enough that it's going to call me on my bluff. Does this make sense, by the way?
Yeah, no, it does. It's just fascinating. I'm just, I'm listening, and I'm also wondering too, what you would say to a business owner who is still terrified of AI, right? Who, they exist everywhere, especially in my industries. There's still this hesitancy to use AI, to trust AI. There's a lot of trepidation around this topic, in particular in business. So what would you say to someone that has this mindset?
Well, I remember in the 90s, actually, late 90s, I'm sitting in a room with the gentleman who invented the magnetic strip on a credit card. and we're talking about the internet. And I'm sitting there going, oh, this just seems crazy. I don't understand why anybody would put their personal information in the internet. And oh, why would somebody put their credit card in on the internet? And, I'm like, oh, this is crazy. I don't understand. And because of my short sightedness, I missed a massive opportunity in the late 90s to take an advantage of the early internet swing. Now, the difference between what happened in the 90s is that in the 90s, like if you didn't have a website, like you had some bandwidth, you had some time because websites weren't available on your phone. You weren't going to sit there and shop. In fact, I didn't even have a mobile phone, I think, until 1999, right? So it's like, but so people chose to have a website, and then it took a while before, if you didn't have a website, you basically didn't exist.
Yeah.
What's happening right now with AI is you're not given that choice. You're going to wake up one morning and Google is going to be like, AI mode, done.
Yeah.
And you don't have that choice. Elon Musk, people, they can feel however they want to feel about Elon, right? The one thing that I would say is that just look at the man's history, and I would not bet against him. Say whatever you want, but I wouldn't bet against a guy who has created multiple disruptors around the world. And one of the things that he talks about is the impact in AI that's going to happen in the future, and how significant it's going to be for every single human on the planet. So you can choose to believe that you know differently than the wealthiest man in the world, who has a history of creating multiple of disrupting very powerful organizations. Or you can be open-minded to say, maybe he might know something that, if nothing else, I want to familiarize myself enough with it so that I'm not left behind. AI is a self-learning mechanism, and even the best of the best of the best of people in AI will openly admit to you that they're not caught up, because it's a geometric improvement. So the best time to start is now. The next best time to start is tomorrow. But the longer you wait, the bigger the gap gets between you and the next person. So, Josh, have you ever heard the saying, how do you make sure that you don't get eaten by a bear?
I don't know. Stay away from a bear?
Well, that's one. You just make sure you're a little faster than your friend.
Oh yeah. Yeah, right? Yeah. I heard the one, or how do you outrun a tiger? Trip your friend.
There you go.
But understand, yeah.
Yeah, you want to be a little bit faster than than your friend. So most people, they're not having this conversation.
Sure.
So if you think you're behind and if you're concerned, you're not. Most people aren't having this conversation. Most people still think AI is reduced to writing articles or helping you write emails. They don't know much more about it than that. But what I'll tell you is that the more you use it, the easier it becomes to use. And AI is one of those beautiful things that if you don't know how to use it, you ask it how to use it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would just, in fact, it would be extremely dangerous to the survival of the business owners that are on this podcast right now to ignore it.
That's interesting, especially when you're talking about Elon Musk. I'm going to scare the shit out of everyone, and then we'll move on to the next topic. But I believe he also was the one that said that AGI, he's giving a 30% chance of being an extinction level event. So when you talk about the survival of business owners, the opposite end of the coin is that it's a survival of the human race. against AI, which probably doesn't help those people that maybe have a trepidation or hesitation to use it. But until then, it is awesome.
Well, it's one of those things, and it's interesting that you brought that up because like there's products out there that are for retail consumers, and there are products out there that are for enterprise consumers, and then for government consumer. Like there's like different level
Yeah.
products. The AI that's going to perform an extinction level event, you and I don't have access to that. Like that's not going to impact us at all. Like that type of level isn't, but what the governments are using and what they can do with military force with AI and what they can do for mind control and all that other stuff, like that part, we're not talking about that part. Actually, that part, that's a different conversation, and that can be scary. There's an interesting podcast with Joe Rogan and Jensen Huang, I believe is his name, who's the CEO of NVIDIA. He has a different context that was actually really, really wonderful that I would recommend people to listen to. But he's much more bullish on AI and the impact that that's going to have on society. And it actually brought a lot more comfort to me as I listened to it. The AI that I'm talking about is the AI for the consumers.
Yeah.
And that's the one where it's like, yes, like for us to use it, it's almost like going to a contractor and saying, I've got this automatic nail gun here. But all right, you're so used to swinging with a hammer and nail, but you don't want to use this. Well, you could still, a hammer and nail, that's fine. But the issue is I'm going to build a house, 3 or 4 times faster than you. I'm going to be able to do it with less labor and make more money. So we can still build the house. It's just I'm going to get more and do more. And I'll be able to quote better prices and be able to get more jobs because I can finish it faster at a more efficiently than you can.
Fair enough, man. And I think, I just want to point out to my audience too, Jensen Huang, I believe, is the one that said that the next generation of millionaires are going to be plumbers.
I believe it.
Yeah. So cool stuff there. I haven't actually seen that episode, but I've been wanting to watch it. So now you just kind of pushed me over the edge. I gotta watch or listen to that episode now. All right, I want to move on. Oh, go ahead.
The next generation of plumbers, I will say, that are going to be millionaires are going to be the next generation of plumbers that leverage AI and also, are great plumbers.
Absolutely. 100%. And maybe there's a platform to talk a little bit about that later on in the episode, but I do love the idea of AI in the blue collar space and what that looks like from a support angle, and from a practical application angle. But I have some other questions I want to kind of get into. So to give my audience a little bit of context, this was a great opening conversation. I love the AI topic. It's so front of mind, top of mind for everybody right now. I'm curious, though, for my sake, for their sake, what is it that your clients hire you to do, and why do they keep calling you back?
That's a great question. Typically, the people come to us asking one of 3 questions. They're saying, how do I grow my business faster? And that's usually because they are stuck in what we know as a setup trap. Most of their business is built on word of mouth and referrals. The next one is some months are feast, some months are famine. How do we create more predictability into our revenue? Not only is that type in, not only does that actually tie into the fact that so much of the business is built on word of mouth and referrals, but it's also built on founder-led sales, meaning everything has to involve the founder to sell the business. And then the third one is the company's just too dependent on me. And that usually is because the founder has to get involved in all the operations and client delivery, and there's a lot of guesswork in knowing what's working and so forth. And so again, it comes down to grow faster, more predictably, and then less dependent on the founder. And that's usually at the point where they reach out and they talk to us.
Good. Why do they keep calling you back?
Well, results at the end of the day, right? I mean, we, unlike many other coaches and consultants in the industry, we don't put people on contracts. We don't have to. The clients that work with us, they generally stay forever. In fact, if you look at the results, if you look at the press that we've had, over the course of the last several years, like there's a reason why the International Business Times calls me the go-to business coach for 7 and 8 figure companies. There's a reason why MSN calls me the leading coach for 8, 9 figure companies, because I do work with some larger ones, but there's a reason why these press, and we're constantly listed on the top of, a number of different media. Like there's a reason why, and there's also a reason why I don't have to hold people onto contracts.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Okay, great. So, in the spirit of the first question that you help founders with, right? How do I grow my business faster? I'll ask you this: what would you say, Charles, is an uncomfortable truth that founders, let's say, a uncomfortable truth about growth that founders don't want to hear but need to hear before they scale their business?
Well, my dad told me growing up as a kid, the secret to being successful was hard work. And I took that literally. I mean, I've never had a traditional quote unquote real job. Ever since I was a little kid, 4 years old is when I started my first business, right? So I never had a traditional quote unquote real job. I've always owned my own business. When I graduated from college, I was determined to make money. And I had my dad in my ear telling me, kid, this is the secret to success. I only have one speed, and that speed is like all in.
Yeah.
And so I would set my alarm for 3:30 in the morning so that I wouldn't quote unquote oversleep. If I got up at midnight to pee, I would start working because I was up, and I'd start working at midnight. I worked 7 days a week. If I would continue working until I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore, and then go to sleep. One day, I'm driving home. I can see my home off the hood of my vehicle, and in that moment, I realized I wasn't going home. I felt this massively sharp pain in the base of my spine, all the way up into my head, and something was wrong. I ended up in the emergency room. I'm on my back. Doctor's looking over me. Mind you, I'm in my early 20s. And the doctor says to me, your organs are shutting down and you're dying. And I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I am like, how is this even possible? I'm too young. Fortunately, obviously, I didn't die because I'm here with you. But my wife is driving me home from the hospital, and I'm like, I don't understand. I don't understand what's going on. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do, but why does it feel like everybody around me is making more money than I am, and I'm working harder than every single one of them out there, and I don't get it. And because I was forced to change. People do things either out of desperation or inspiration. Tony Robbins told me that many years ago. I was forced to change. And through that forcing to change, I started to build business differently. I started to look for leverage. I started to find ways that didn't involve hard work to create an outcome. And as a result of that, 1 year after that hospital event is when I created my first $1 million at 24 years old. In fact, I built so I've owned multiple different companies over the course of my life. When I was 24, I decided, or actually just before that, I decided to buy a few tracts of land and I'd build roads in neighborhoods, because why not? And not only did I create my first multi-million-dollar business, I also had one of the highest profit margins in the industry. And the thing is what happened was I hired one of the big accounting firms out of Boston. And the principal of the accounting firm showed up to my house completely unannounced. And I'm like, okay, this is weird. And so I open the door and he lets himself in and he walks into our breakfast table and he sits down And he goes, "What are you doing? And is it legal?" And I'm like, wait, now what is happening right now? See, the thing is I didn't know. Like, I didn't know, like, no, like, I didn't really know what I was doing. So I just did what I thought made sense, right? Because nobody sat there and told me this is exactly what we had to do. I just did what I thought made sense. Um, he says, you've paid fair market value for the property. You're selling it for fair market value, but you have one of the highest profit margins in the entire industry, and I can't figure it out. Want me to tell you what I did?
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there and I looked at it and I'm like, see, I was at the time several $1 million in debt. And so I'm paying double digit interest rates because I had to borrow hard money at that age.
Uh-huh.
And so I needed to find like desperation. I had to find ways to pay that off as fast as I could. But I'm looking at it and I'm like, all these people, they're buying other things. They have to buy furniture for their home. They could buy alarms for their home. They all need to buy TVs. Some of them are going to buy home theaters. They're going to want furniture for their patio. And I just started to make a list of every single thing that they would buy. And I would go to these companies like Tweeter. I don't know if you remember Tweeter from back in the day.
Why does that sound familiar?
It's almost like a Circuit City, but it was even before Circuit City.
Right.
So I went to Tweeter and I said, look, I've got all these homeowners and they need TVs and home theaters and everything. Look, it'd be less expensive for you to come in and install the home theater while there's a frame before we put the walls up and whatnot. And I have a list of buyers. If I introduce them to you, would you give them a discount that is unavailable to the public? Because at the end of the day, I'm allowing you to install this cheaper and you don't have to pay to acquire the customer. So could you give them it cheaper than you could if they came in off the street? And because I'm doing that, could you give me a small percentage of their sale? And they go, well, we've never done that before, but that sounds interesting. Let me take it up the chain. And they came back and they said yes. But I made relationships like this for anything and everything you could think about that somebody would end up buying to put inside of their home. So I started getting checks every week, thousands of dollars, boom, 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 that just kept coming in. I had nothing to do with it other than referring people to all these, like, you can, if you want to do business with these people, great, you can. You'll get a discount that you can't get in off the street. And I just started making all this extra money. The thing is I didn't know other people didn't do this stuff. I thought everybody did this stuff.
So instead of working hard in the traditional sense, you leveraged not even vendors, potential vendors for your clients. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah.
So another example would be maybe like a barbecue or a grill.
Yeah.
Right. You would go to a grill place and say, hey, listen, you don't have to pay to acquire this customer. Give me a kickback, if you will, if I refer them to you, and you can go in before the house is complete or whatever and put in your grill.
Yeah, and you give them you have to give them a benefit they couldn't get. I would only work with people that would give my clients a benefit that they could not get off the street.
So they give your client a discount or something.
Or a bonus or something like that. But it had to be something. Because what I didn't want is I didn't want my client to be like, you're only referring them because you're getting a commission. Because that just felt like it was a win-win lose.
Right.
And I'm like, no, I want to actually act as on your behalf, and I'm going to get you a preferred benefit. And this way, everybody wins. All three of us win.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, and even like we had to be really creative sometimes. I went to a bank because all my homeowners needed to finance their home. And I went to a bank and I'm like, here, I'd like to refer people to you. And they go, well, we can't do that. I go, what do you mean? They go, that's illegal. We can't pay you for referrals to the bank. And I go, oh, I'm curious. Do you pay for advertising? And they said, we do. And I said, would you like to buy space on all of our signs And as a result, I will refer people over to you for buying space on my signs. And they said yes. So they paid me several $1,000s to have space on my sign. And it worked out great for everybody.
Yeah.
So, it's like we work so hard to bring clients to us. And one of the things that we work with our clients is like, look, there's so much money that you have with the clients that you're already working with. Let's maximize the amount of that they're spending with you, the amount of value of that particular client. And so that's one way. Like, you have all these people here, let's maximize that. And then there's another way. There's like, you have all these leads, and you have all these leads sitting in your database that you're doing nothing with, that you've already tried to sell them on your services and they didn't buy from you. Why not monetize those leads so we can show them how to monetize those leads as well? And that's just like a small fraction of like all the different work that we do with them. But it's like, it's more than just, hey, we're going to help you grow your business, and we're going to help you close, bring leads in, and then close the business, and then yay, everybody wins. It's like, that's why our results are different, because it's like, no, like, that's great. You can find people to help you do that. Like, we're going to show you how to build a really robust, high value organization.
Wow, that's interesting. So can we play with this a little bit, Charles? Like in a role play scenario, let's say that I am a client of yours, a new client, right? And I'm in the HVAC space. Let's say it's the residential HVAC space.
Yep.
And I come to you and I say, listen, I feel like I'm growing a little bit slow. I'm working my ass off, Charles, and I'm doing the right things. I'm checking the boxes. I'm selling my services, but it's just going so slow. How would you coach me to leverage something in a similar way that you did in the home building, arena, or whatever, however, that was? What are some ideas that you would give me to help me leverage something else besides my time?
Awesome. Great question. So when it comes to the HVAC, right? And we're just going to think out loud here, and we're going to play ball.
Yeah, let's do it.
So what are some of the things that people will buy before they hire an HVAC contractor?
Oh boy, air filters, maybe. And listen, I'm sitting in I'm gonna pretend I'm a client, right? And I'm just struggling here. I really am struggling. But let's say air filters. Geez, I don't know.
Are we talking new construction HVAC? Or
no, let's talk break fix. Like somebody who already has a home, who the HVAC company has gone out and servicing. Maybe they're replacing the unit, if it's bad.
Okay. All right. Got it. So, I mean, in many cases, it could be, they could be buying a new house, right? So it could be a real estate broker, right?
Yep.
So it could be a real estate broker. A lot of times, they're also connected with the oil and gas companies, right?
Yeah. Sure. So energy company. Yeah.
Yep. A lot of times you can build a moat around that by building a strong relationship with an oil company. If they don't already have their own HVAC division, you create a really strong relationship with the oil company, because the oil companies, they often, will come in and they'll clean, the HVAC unit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when there's a problem, many times the client will just assume, well, this is maybe, let me call the oil company or whatever it is. And, they'll call the oil company and they're like, this isn't our issue. You got to deal with somebody else, So I would look at if you have a B2C play, right, which is right now what you're talking about, B2C, your greatest form of leverage is going to be, how can we turn this into a B2B play? So that would be one. So, because if I can make a really strong relationship with a real estate agent, if I can make a really strong relationship with oil companies, if I can make really strong relationship with an electrician, if I can make really strong relationships with all these people, and I go, hey, look, typically what I find is, when you're working with homeowners that are going to buy a new home, or building inspectors, when you're working with people who are trying to buy a new home, and you get to the point where their HVAC needs becomes a stopping point. We can work with you to fix that quickly, and in doing so, I'll give you a, a small commission from whatever work that they bring me, and at the same time, any referrals that come from you, I'll make sure that we'll give them a discount that they couldn't get anywhere else. We'll make you look like the hero. We'll say because they came referred from you, we'll give them like a X $200 credit, whatever that might be, as because they came from you. And so that's one side. But then one of the things that really stinks when you have HVAC. Let's say if you have oil-based HVAC or whatever that is, like what stinks is that people have to maintain it and they don't maintain it, and there's always these different issues. And then if you have an issue and you got to call somebody, it always seems to happen that it's on a weekend, and then you got to pay overtime, and then it costs you a lot of money. And that's the discussion that you have with the homeowner. Like, look, here's the deal. In order to save you money on your gas, you want to make sure that your air conditioning unit or your HVAC unit, you want to make sure that it's operating at peak efficiency every single time. When commonly we find these issues happening, they usually need to be maintained over this period of time. And don't you know it, when there is an issue, doesn't it always happen that it's a weekend, or it's a holiday or something like that, and then you end up paying all these extra fees because we like to do things in a couple different ways. There's some people that they're okay with rolling the dice and paying the extra fees and maintaining everything on their own and doing what they have to do, and they're okay with it. Our best clients like to do something different because it saves them money in the long term, as well as headache, something nobody wants to deal with. We put you on an ongoing schedule, and it'll save you on average X% per visit. And we just come in every period of time. We'll call you in advance every period of time. We get it scheduled. We'll come in, we'll clean it, we'll replace your filters, we'll do this, we'll do that, blah, blah, blah. And by the way, if you have an issue, and it doesn't matter if it's Christmas Day at 2:00, we're not going to pay you the overage charges. As long as you're on our plan and you have the issue, you don't pay the emergency fees. But what happens is when you build that predictable flow of revenue that happens month after month, year after year, if you look at it right now, the average person, if you're turning around and you're like, oh, I want to grow by 30% next year. It's like, okay, cool. How many clients do you have right now? And I'm just going to make something up. Sure. Let's say I got 100 clients. Okay, you have 100 clients and you want to grow 30% next year. Okay. What is the percentage of those clients that keep coming back to you on a regular basis? And for HVAC, it's actually going to be fairly low, right? They don't just come back and, it's kind of a mess.
Sure.
And so it's like, now you have to replace a good percentage of those clients and then add 30 more, and it's exhausting. You're feeling like chasing your tail over and over and over again.
Yeah.
When you build your business on what's known as MRR, monthly recurring revenue, then what happens is, let's say you're able to get 100 clients on monthly recurring revenue and you want to grow 30%, you just add 30 more. Instead of having to replace all these people, you just add 30 more. And so when you have recurring revenue, at some point you may want to exit the business. You might want to say, Charlie, getting close to retirement, I want to sell the business. When you have recurring revenue, the multiple that you can have on your business for recurring revenue is so much higher. It can often be the difference between being rich and being wealthy, because you can get massive amounts more money when you have recurring revenue. So, again, we're just barely scratching the surface of the different possibilities that exist. But that is just one way that you would go about doing it, as opposed to maybe conventional wisdom would be like, well, let's take out some Google ads. Well, let's go to Facebook and let's take out some ads. Like, okay, we could talk about that, but why don't we do something that the rest of your competitors aren't doing right now? And and that will help build, an additional layer of robustness into the company.
I really appreciate that example. It makes it easier to digest, at least for me. And I asked that specifically because I'm not in the B2C space. I'm into the B2B space. So when I ask a question like that, it really helps me, look through other lenses. So I
Yeah.
truly appreciate that you articulating that so well. So I want to stay on the topic of growth real quick. Before we get into the predictability, which I'm fascinated by, also very excited about that. But with this growth aspect, there's a lot here, I think, from a mindset perspective, as well as a practical perspective for our listeners. So I would first start by asking, what are the risks of growing too fast?
Yeah. So there's a difference between fast growth and predictable growth, right?
Yeah.
If you think about the companies that have made it on the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies list, it's a badge of honor for a lot of people. They're super proud of it.
I've been on the list 3 times now.
Hey.
It's funny you mentioned that. So let's use me as a guinea pig here.
Well, and now again, I use you as a guinea pig, but you may be on the great side of the statistical side of things because,
we'll see.
well, according to the Kauffman Foundation, 66% of companies that make it on the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies within 5 to 8 years of first getting listed shrink in size, go out of business, or are disadvantageously sold. 66%.
66%, really?
Yep.
Wow. Well, I will tell you that since we landed first on the Inc. 5000 list, we have continued to increase revenue, except for the last 2 years. We have gone the other way. So I think that statistically, I fall within that 66%. Is that what that means?
Yes, you would. I guess you would.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's use me as a guinea pig then.
So you're shrunk in size, right?
Yeah, I did.
And because when people are going for fast growth, it's oftentimes growth at all costs, right? So it's like whatever it's going to take, just grow, a lot of hustle, a lot of grind, word of mouth and referrals. It's all built on hard work, word of mouth and referrals. Just push. It's unsustainable.
Speaking my language, man. I'm resonating right now on a level you don't even know. Well, you probably do know. You work with people like me all the time. So sorry, continue.
Yeah, but I mean, it's unsustainable.
Yeah,
and that's what happens. It's unsustainable, and that's why it ends up going the other way, right? If they did the Inc. 5000 based on profits as opposed to revenue, you'd see different companies also on that list.
No kidding.
Right.
Yeah. So what does that mean? So I mean, as far as like when you say it's not sustainable, I've seen it. Obviously, we just talked about it. I lived it a little bit, and so I kind of understand inherently what you mean. But can we point to a couple of things that aren't sustainable when it comes to growth?
Yeah, I mean, word of mouth and referrals itself aren't sustainable.
Okay, I got you. So word of mouth and
you
referrals.
Only have like at some point, it's like you've tapped into your entire network, and it's just like it gets to this, it's exhaustive feeling of like you're always feeling you're waiting for the phone to ring.
Yeah.
Right. So there's no predictability in lead generation. It's not like predictably that you'll get 2 to 5 calls a day. Like you don't know that. Instead, you're like, if I don't get out there and pawn the pavement, nothing's gonna happen. Right. So it's like, or you just don't know. Some days you might get 6 calls, and then you might go 10 days with nothing, right? And then it's like it's exhausting and it's frustrating, and stressful is an understatement, right? So predictability is, how do we do something and receive an outcome and be able to repeat that over and 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 over again, right? You can't do that with word of mouth and referrals. You can create predictability. We talked about bringing in partners. You create predictability when you have several partners. You also create predictability. I mean, in my company, we've got we have several of the largest business media organizations in the world that will send clients to us, and that creates some degree of predictability. I mean, we had one media company that was sending, I can't even remember. It was something like several hundred every month, several hundred opportunities every single month, and they'd been doing it for 8 years, something like that. So it's like that is some degree of predictability, right? So so you could do that. There's digital media that can help create some degree of predictability. We work with a woman out in New Jersey who runs a therapist organization, and we helped her set up a digital campaign for her organization, and now she has multiple locations. And she started by making $250,000 a year. That's all the amount. That's everything that she made. $250,000 a year. Everything was so dependent on her. She had to be the one to submit for billing, doing all the invoices. She was sitting on her bed at night while her husband was trying to fall asleep, trying to do the bookkeeping and all that other jazz. She took all the clients, and we said to her when we met, I said, "Look, this should easily be $1 million business." And she's like, "Nah, I don't think so. I don't think you understand my industry." And I'm like, "I think I might know a little more than you might think." And now she makes $250,000 every 3 weeks.
Yes.
So
love that.
Because it really is all about, first of all, now I don't know much about your business, Josh. We're just only talking at a high level, but I can tell you, I've in the last 16 years, talking with well over 1,000 entrepreneurs. If I really put my thumb on one thing to say, what is the number one reason that is preventing your growth? Love it or hate it, it's you. It's you. You're stuck in the founder's trap. And when I say you're stuck in the founder's trap, Josh, when we think about an organization, an org chart, oftentimes we think about, we have the CEO at the top, and then you got a branch of people that come down, and those are the people that report up to the CEO, and then there's people underneath it. And that's the way we always think the org chart is supposed to look. And in our minds, we're business owners, and we're like, yeah, that's the org chart. I'm the boss. I'm the CEO. I'm at the top. But no, actually, here's what it is. You're right there in the middle. Marketing is all dependent on your word of mouth and referrals. Sales is all dependent on your ability to close. Operations are all dependent on you basically saying this needs to get done and do it and so forth. Client delivery is all dependent on your ability to sign off on it and make sure, things get done. And everything is so dependent on you. If I pull you out of the center, the business comes crumbling down. And so the entrepreneur is the founder is the greatest limiting factor towards growth. There are two really hard points to growing a business. The first hard point is when you start. We all know that. We've been there. The second hard point is one thing that very few people ever actually talk about, but everybody that gets to a certain level of success falls into, and that's what we call the founder's trap. That founder's trap typically starts to settle. You start to get into it around that 1 to 3 million mark. Because you can build a business from hard work, word of mouth, and referrals up to about that 1 to 3 million mark. And then you begin to kind of hit this ceiling. And then it's because you're successful that you fall into this trap. Because the more business you get, the more team members you have, the more responsibilities, the more everything starts to come back to you, come back to you, and come back to you. Now, this is like quicksand. The harder you work, the deeper you end up starting to sink. The more successful you become, the deeper you start to sink. You can't work yourself out of the founder's trap. And this is where some people get overwhelmed and they're burnt out and they just tap out, and that's okay. Or you take a more strategic approach and you say, how do I get out of the founder's trap? And that's when we start looking at putting in systems and strategies that create leverage rather than requiring all hard work.
There's that leverage term again. Now kind of internal instead of external. So that's interesting. How would you? So now we're kind of getting into the mindset stuff here. So how would you go about approaching someone who is in that grow at all costs mindset that needs to move closer to this predictability, right? Or getting out of the founder's trap? How would you help somebody make that transition?
So So first of all, they have to want to. And when I say that, it's because it actually is really difficult for a founder to let go. And, they've done things a certain way and they've become successful in that way. And now we're trying to get them to change their approach. And a lot of times they don't want to let go. And they're very resistant. And they just want to keep doing everything. My dad was actually in that same mindset. His defense mechanism was he'd say, nobody can do it better than me. And nobody can do it just like me. And that was his mindset. And so he was always going to stay stuck in the founder's trap. And but then there are going to be those people that are like, I really want to take this to the next level. What do I have to do? And it's like, okay, well, we have a few ways that we have to do this. Number one, we got to remove all the guesswork for starters. We have to start looking at some core KPIs that you have so we can get an indication of what's working and what's not working. The more guesswork that you have, the more limited you're going to be. Guesswork is a cancer of all business. Let's start to eliminate all the guesswork by getting some numbers out there so we know it's working, and then we can measure the impact. Because if we start doing something and it's going in the wrong direction, we need to flag it, identify it, and then solve it right off the bat. And then as we have these KPIs and these numbers and we know what's going on, then it's like saying, okay, what's taking most of your time right now? Let's start there. What's taking most of your time? And let's start building systems around what's taking most of your time so that we can empower people to start creating that leverage for you so that you don't have to do it. Somebody else can execute it very consistently. And it frees you up to do other things, whether that's grow the business, build new partnerships, or whatever that might be. And so we have to start by freeing you up from being stuck in all these day-to-day places. Your zone of genius is the reason why you've been able to take your company from this point to this point. But then if you look at the amount of time that you've spent in your zone of genius, when you were growing, you spent more and more time in that zone of genius. When you plateaued, it's because you spent less and less time there and spent more time doing the stuff that you had to do to keep the lights on in the company, right? There's a difference between things that you are good at and things you're really excellent at, and then things that are uniquely your zone of genius.
I'm really glad you brought that up. We did an episode with Gay Hendricks, who has kind of the same framework, but he calls it the zone of genius and zone of excellence. The zone of excellence is the trap people fall into because that's what they're good at. The zone of genius is the one you're talking about, the things that they can only inherently do that they can lose themselves in, basically.
Yeah, and it's so true. So true. I had a wake-up call with one of my team members. His name is Joe. We're out in California. This is a few years ago. And he says to me, hey, can we go for a walk? I'm like, yeah, what's up? So go for a walk. And he goes, hey, I don't know how to tell you this, but you're not that smart. And I'm like, all right. Like, this is not a good way to start the conversation. I'm like, all right, where are we going with this here? And he goes, no, don't take it the wrong way. I'm like, I think we've already passed that point. I'm like, where are you going with this? And he goes, no. He says, you're still trying to hold on to too much. And he said, where you're uniquely amazing at is like somewhere between 5 and 10% of what it is that we need to get done. Like, but you're the only one who can do it. But the 95% of what actually needs to get done, the rest of us can do. But you hold on too much. You don't, if you could just empower us to do this and get you out of this stuff, we'll be able to grow so much faster than we grow right now. And I was like, man, he's right. And I know this stuff. But, sometimes coaches need coaching too, right? But even I was finding myself falling into the trap because it's one thing to know it. It's another thing to live it.
Yeah.
Right.
Can this trap be at any point? This isn't dependent on revenue. This isn't you're in the trap if you're at $1 million. You're not in the trap if you're at $10 million. It can be at
Uh,
pretty much any level, right?
yeah, just commonly you see it in the 1 to 3 million mark, but I've
Okay.
seen founders. I'm working with a founder right now. She made 9 million in January, and she's deep, deep, deep into the founder's trap, just as much as I've ever seen anyone into the founder's trap.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, revenue is, it actually, revenue is one thing, but it's just commonly you see around 1 to 3 million. There's always going to be
Okay.
exceptions, right?
So I'm curious. We're talking right now kind of about $1 to $3 million in revenue. The founders and the leaders that run organizations in that revenue range. How do they think differently than somebody who runs a 9-figure business? And what I mean by that is like, as far as how they lead and how they show up,
Yep.
what did they do different?
Well, I mean, for one, if you think about return on time, right? So, somebody who is, maybe at that 1 million mark, they're going to look at something and be like, oh, it's just faster if I do it myself, and so maybe it's a 30-minute task and it's like, oh, it's just faster if I do it myself. So they do it themselves. But every single day they have these 30-minute tasks that they're like, it's just faster if I do it myself. And so over the course of a week, that is what, 2.5 hours over the course of a week. You take 2.5 hours, you multiply that by, 52 weeks out of the year. What does that mean? That's 150 hours. Is that right?
100, yeah, something like that. 115, 50, or something like
150.
that. A lot.
Let's just
A
say
lot,
150
Charles.
hours, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So how many weeks would the average so it's like 150 if they work a 40-hour week, that's basically 2, 3, almost 4 weeks, so almost an extra month. So if you think about it, you think, oh, what? Well, it's just 30 minutes a day. But actually, you've just robbed yourself, if you do it every day, of literally a full month of productive work. And so, but when you look at these 9-figure CEOs, they are disciplined like no other, like massively disciplined. It's the biggest difference between a 6 and 7-figure CEO to a 9-figure CEO is the level of discipline that they have. They're very disciplined as it comes to their time, and just they're non-negotiables, right? And so, I think that would ultimately come down to the biggest the biggest thing that I can think of offhand is just that discipline. I mean, there are some people that I've met that are just, they're so disciplined, like so hardcore. In my mind, I'm like, okay, well, it's probably not the lifestyle that I want to live. I like
Sure.
a little bit more flexibility. And, if that means that I'm stuck at, a little less than that, then whatever, that's fine. But it's a choice.
Do you think this discipline in business, like in leadership, how you're talking, is this a skill that can be learned, or is this a trait that somebody has already that causes them to be a 9-figure entrepreneur?
Well, you can choose to learn it, or you can hire somebody to do it for you, right? So I just had a conversation with a client this morning, and I said to her, well, you don't have to be the CEO. And she says, what do I mean? What do you mean by that? I said, let's look at how much money you're putting in your pocket right now, right? You could pay somebody, say, $250,000, which is a good, you get a good CEO for $250,000 plus performance incentives on growth. You're still putting a crap ton of money in your pocket. This person will run the business. You're basically paying them to take over your headaches. They know the CEO stuff. They're going to manage, they're going to lead. They're really great at that. And you do what you're great at. Stay in that zone of genius. Create. innovate. You're still involved in the business. You still own the company. You just have somebody else doing all the running of the business for you. And she stopped and she looked at me. She goes, "Oh my God, I never thought about it that way." I'm like, "Hey, you don't have to be CEO. Founders are oftentimes not good CEOs. Look, I'm not afraid to admit, I don't think I'm a great CEO. My team might think a little bit differently, but I don't think I'm a great CEO." Oh, it's like at some point, I'll have somebody take over and be CEO instead of me. I want to be on podcasts like this. I want to speak on stage. I want to continue media interviews. I want to build relationships with core partners, go to different events. That's all I want to do. But the impact that that's going to have on the organization is massive. I don't have to be CEO.
Do you find that a lot of people wrap up their identity in being CEO of the business or the leader? And so does that make this conversation difficult for some people?
Uh, that's the difference between talking to a teenager who thinks that they're completely, invisible versus, an adult, like somebody who's seasoned, like somebody who's new to starting their own business. They're like, "Oh yeah, if I just get 1% of the market, I have I have nothing right now, no business idea, no concept, no whatever, but I'm going to start something. And then if I just get 1%, I'm going to get $10 million this year, and they make these wild decisions and they make their first win and they go out and they buy a McLaren and, they're like, they haven't earned any scars, and then what happens is over time they earn scars. And then they start saying, "Okay, what do I have to do to be serious about growing this thing?"
Yeah.
And then when they look at it, they realize that, the seasoned entrepreneur, the seasoned business owner, they don't care about titles. They care about the results. Like the seasoned one cares about the results. It's the amateur that thinks the title is more important.
I appreciate that answer. I asked that question because I know that a lot of listeners on this show are newer to starting their business and running their business. And so before they get into this founder's trap or even considering themselves a seasoned entrepreneur, a seasoned business leader, I want them to have that awareness that they don't have to wait, right? They don't have to wait
Yep.
for an event to happen or for the scars, as you put it, right? They can make this conscious decision that they are working toward replacing themselves as CEO rather than it be a revelation at one point in time.
Right. Yeah.
So good. All right. So I'm curious, do you have any specific like points of action or levers or framework that you typically use when you're helping people create predictability in their revenue?
We do.
Can you go over some of those with us?
Sure. So it was actually one of my team members, Zach. He had said to me, because originally when I started coaching, it was just me. It was just me. I did everything, and then he was like, "Dude, we got to figure out how you do what you do, and we got to put this into a system. We got to put this into a framework." And it took a while, long time actually, but we created what we call the predictable profits operating system. And the operating system is broken down into three major components: setup, sales, and scale. And each one has three subcomponents, right? So when it comes to setup, like a lot of people go, we do marketing. Well, I hate to break it to you, but you can't do marketing. Nobody can do marketing. Marketing is a function. It's a function of how you create, capture, and nurture demand. And so setup is the basis behind everything. Setup is how are you creating that demand and how effectively are you doing it? How are you capturing that demand and how are you nurturing that demand? If you nail your setup and do it right, by the time they get on the phone with you with sales, you've got buyer-ready leads. right? So our buyers are researchers. We know that. We have to get that set up right. How you create, capture, nurture demand. Then we go into sales. And sales is everything from not only qualifying the leads, it's closing mastery so you can break free from founder-led sales. And then there's this other element of repeat revenue. In other words, there's a difference between reoccurring revenue and recurring revenue. Reoccurring is the HVAC guy that has somebody come to him in January and then somebody come to him in July and they pay twice, and that is reoccurring revenue. Recurring revenue is they pay you January, February, March, April, May, all the way through. That's recurring. We want recurring revenue. And every business has the opportunity to generate recurring revenue regardless of your industry. It doesn't matter. You just have to be creative. And then when we talk about scale is all the ways between data intelligence. So you have zero guesswork. It's operations and systems. So now you're able to deliver things with certain levels of consistency. And it's also about creating that best self type of a team environment. So great culture, great team. So you have an organization so that not all the weight is sitting on your shoulders. You actually have other people in the organization that are helping to grow the business and support your initiative. It's an amazing feeling. I got to tell you, as a business owner, the best feeling that I've ever felt as a business owner is when my team took it upon themselves to drive growth without having to come to me for permission or direction. When they saw an opportunity and they went for it. And it was like, look at that. Holy cow. When they go to bed thinking about it, when they start thinking, what do I need to do? That is what I call freedom as a business owner. Yeah. When suddenly all the weight that you've carried on your shoulders for so long is now distributed and you have a whole team rowing in the same direction. Oh, that's magic.
How do you foster that?
So the typical CEO turns around and goes, I pay you for this, you get this done, and I make money, and you get paid for a job, and then, go, so be it. You know what my goals are, but I don't know yours, and I don't need to know you because you're an employee. It's kind of typical, right? When you create an environment like the one that we have, it's like, I understand you're going to spend most of your waking hours in the job in working with me. What's most important to you right now? What's important to you? So I want to know, what is the goal that you have this year that if I could help you achieve that goal would be a huge win for you? So I tell you what, here's my goal and here's your goal. If you can help me reach this goal, I can help you reach your goal. Why don't we do this together? And now it's like, oh, well, this is interesting. And it's like, yeah. I mean, we had one of my team members, I was like, so what is your goal? One of his goals was, I want to go to Serbia. Why is that important to you? My wife is from Serbia. Okay. And when do you want to do that? Well, at some point this year. I mean, I don't even know if it's possible, but at some point this year, I'd like to go. Well, I'll tell you what. Before we leave this meeting, let's block it off in the calendar right now that you're going to Serbia. What? Block it off in your calendar and tell your wife you're going to Serbia, and let's make it happen. And he was like, oh, okay. But what you're telling the team is that they are important to you.
Yeah.
And it's also important, when I talk about the accomplishments that we've had, typically, I know this is maybe a little different because we're in this podcast and whatnot, but typically when I'm talking and I'm on stage or being interviewed or whatever that might be in the media, it makes me really uncomfortable when I talk about, it was ranked as, number one thought leader for sales and marketing on this place and number one CEO in Florida for this place, whatnot. Like, it makes me really uncomfortable because deep down, I'm like, I'm only a reflection of my team. I couldn't be anywhere where I am now if it wasn't from my team. And I'm like, I don't, I mean, I like obviously the ego in me likes to see my name. But the other part of me is like, I would be remiss if I didn't emphasize the fact that it really is my team. I'm just a reflection of the team because I just so happen to be a CEO, but it really is them. And when the team doesn't need the credit, like they're not sitting there being like, I want to see my name on the cover. They don't need that. But what they want to know is that you're not sitting there going, I did it all by myself.
Yep.
Because if you're that guy that is like, or that girl, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm so smart, I did it this, and your team's going, you know how hard I worked to do that? And you're taking all the credit? Like, you know what? Good luck to you, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah. That resonates deeply, with me, Charles. I back in September of this year, I was awarded one of the top CEOs in Phoenix,
Congratulations.
the Titan 100. Thank you, but right. It was also hard for me, and because, and here's where it was difficult for me, and I actually had a conversation with my team about this. There's about 52 people in my company right now. And I was nominated for this award, and I won this award, and there's big biography and a trophy and all this stuff.
That's cool,
right? It's cool, but I told them, I said, listen, this is a reflection of you. This is not a reflection of me. If it were a reflection of me, you would have voted on this, not this magazine or whatever, right? This belongs to you. It was hard for me to be like, hey, look what I did, because I understand and I realize how much of that came from me just making sure the right people were in the right seats.
Yeah.
And then, not to discredit that, like that's a skill in itself. I had to learn how to put people in the right seats, but ultimately, like I'm not doing the rowing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it really, when I hear you say that, it's actually almost comforting for me, right? Because I'm sitting here like, what the fuck was wrong with me? Like, you know what I'm saying? So, but I really love that. And what my biggest takeaway here from this question is this, figuring out the goals of your employees, your team members. And then the second part of it, what you said, and I'm repeating this so my audience can take this away, right? Is why is that important to you? Because it's one thing to know their goals, but it's another to have that intimate connection saying, okay, well, now my CEO knows why this is so important to me.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important distinction. Admittedly, one that I've probably overlooked myself. I've seen and heard this theme over the years of like getting, understanding the goals of your employees. But this, why is that important to you? Man, it's like a light bulb just went off.
Yeah.
Right. And it's so, so important. So I felt the need to emphasize that.
Well, I appreciate that. One thing that it's come up as well, and I just feel like I'd be doing your audience a disservice if I didn't bring it up. Just speaking of, I guess we're being vulnerable, right, and transparent. When people look at the different accomplishments that I've had and achieved, oftentimes they will make assumptions and they'll be like, well, he must be smart, smarter, or he must have some sort of like, superpower, so to speak, right? But the reality is that like I struggle more than the average person. I was diagnosed as a kid with having one of the worst cases of learning disabilities that the doctor had ever seen. The doctor looked at my mom, and I couldn't even believe that she did this while I was in the room. But she looked at my mom and she was like, "I'm surprised that your son can operate in an average school." And like deep down,
Wow.
I couldn't operate in school. I could never learn in class. I would have to come home and then I would have to teach myself because I couldn't learn in school. The whatever that environment was, I couldn't. I can't. I couldn't. I've taught myself since, but
Uh-huh.
I couldn't learn in that environment. Um, you know, I have ADHD, but what entrepreneur doesn't have ADHD, right? But I also have like multiple different forms of dyslexia, which is
Mhm.
again what makes it hard. When people go, well, I mean, how bad are your learning disabilities? I said, well, let me start with this. When I come home after a business trip, if I still have my luggage, I'm proud of myself. And they're like, wait, what? And I'm like, it just in the last few years, I've left my luggage behind 6 times.
Oh, wow.
6 times at the airport because when my brain gets in this zone, when I start thinking, and all of a sudden, all of a sudden, I go into this mode of very, very, very deep thought, and I'm functioning, meaning like I'm going from point A to point B, but I'm in like almost like this other state, and then I just like my luggage disappears, like everything, because I'm just in this like trying to run all this mental math in my brain because I focus on one thing, and then all of a sudden it's like I snap out of it, and it's like, oh shoot, what did I do with my carry-on? Right? Where did I leave it?
Uh-huh.
Right? So it's like I didn't go to an Ivy League. I didn't get like I'm not like Elon Musk. Elon Musk has got like some crazy level genius. I think the person that I resonate most with would be like Richard Branson.
Oh,
And when I
sure.
say that, it's because I read this book. I named my son Branson after him. I read this book called Losing My Virginity. And he was like, which is his autobiography.
Mhm.
And he was like, you know what? I got dyslexia all over the place. He's like, a lot of people, they talk about their successes. I'm going to talk about my failures. I have failed more than most people. And I think that's why I'm a billionaire because I just so happen to be dumb enough to keep standing up again. And I just keep standing up and I just keep standing up and I just keep standing up and I just keep pushing forward. But I, I just, I just continue to stay in the game. And I think that's probably why you see me like I've been drinking this stuff like as we're talking, right? Like Founders Fuel.
Uh-huh.
Like Founders Fuel is something I had formulated for me just to help me, maintain focus,
Mm.
right? So it's like it's a struggle. Every single day of my life, it's been a struggle for me. I have to hit the gym in the morning because I have to move. If I don't, my brain doesn't operate. I have to eat very intentionally every single day. If I deviate from what I eat, I don't think the same way. I get, and it's like, so yeah, I just felt like it's come up a few different times in conversation, and I'm like, you know what? I want people to realize that, like, dude, if a guy riddled with a shit ton of dyslexia and ADHD couldn't learn in a quote unquote regular school can do this, like everybody can do this. You just got to be crazy enough to stay in the game.
I love that. And you answered the question I was going to ask, right? Which is what's the advice you would give someone who feels like they're in the same boat? Maybe they have some of the same learning disabilities and they use it as a crutch.
It's actually, if God came down and said to me, would you give your kids the same learning disabilities that you have right now? I would say, please, absolutely 100%. If I could give them one thing that I have, give them that. And the reason is because for up until about probably 22, it really was really hard. I knew I couldn't keep up with the rest of the kids. I felt dumb. Even though I got good grades, I had to learn outside of school, but I did feel like I wasn't as smart as everybody else.
Mhm.
But then after that moment, somehow, somewhere, I managed to turn that into my superpower. My brain doesn't turn the same way everybody else's turns. So I see things that nobody else is seeing. Then, so that's how I've got to where I'm at now, because I can see things that nobody else can see, because I'm just found ways that my brain, but the thing is you see things that I can't see, right? And everybody else sees things that I can't see. But it just so happened, for the one thing that I see that others can't see, they're willing to pay me for it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's like everybody has a superpower. Every person has a superpower. Sometimes it took me 22 years to find it, or somewhere around there. But sometimes it just takes a little bit longer to find that superpower. But everybody does have a superpower.
Yeah.
And we have our kryptonite, like leaving luggage behind.
There, there you go. Charles, what's one question that you wish more people would ask you? And how would you answer it?
Depends on the day, really. It really does depend on the day. I think a lot of people are going through some hardship right now. I wrote about this just recently. You know, I empathize, and every once in a while I get emotional because my dad died not too long ago, right? And so a couple of years ago,
I'm
but it
sorry.
still seems fresh. Thank you. It still seems fresh, and like these are one of those days that I just, I'm feeling the loss of my dad, right? And so it just brings me to like just a different emotional level of just like, ugh. And I look at different people that are struggling and dealing with emotions and dealing with health issues. And I spoke to a client this morning, and she's dealing with dealing with different health issues, um, and it can be really lonely and put a toll on some people. And it just so happened that I read an article that 75% of entrepreneurs experience a mental health issue.
Saw that
And
too.
and I'm like, you know what? If you had asked me that 20 years ago, would I say that was going to be me? I would have said, no way, no how. Like I'm loving life. Everything's great. Entrepreneurship's not a straight line. It goes up and it goes down. When it goes down, it's hard when it goes down. And there are going to be plenty of times when you're up at 3:00 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, and that you feel the pain of the anxiety and the worries. And then all of a sudden it gets so strong that you realize, well, looks like I'm starting my day at 3 a.m. because I'm not going back to sleep again. And it's those moments of the constant anxiety. Jensen Wong from NVIDIA, he goes, you know what? I spend my days in a constant moment of anxiety. So it doesn't matter how much money you have and, whatnot. And I guess just because, my dad was an entrepreneur. He died of brain cancer, but, was an entrepreneur his whole life. I saw the stress that he was under. I had 2 conversations today of just people under extreme stress. A lot of it is just health issues and things, that are also beyond the control. And I'm like, you know what? You're not alone. You're not alone. We all deal with it. And you know what? Entrepreneurship, you have to be crazy to be willing to do this. You have to be crazy. You got to be willing to accept the fact that you are not normal. You are completely unordinary, not ordinary. You're choosing a difficult path to life, because you're taking so much stress on you. But you know what? I wouldn't change it for anything, because I'm a sick SOB when it comes to that. I freaking love it. But it's in those moments of challenge and despair that can be lonely, And I lost a colleague, not a friend, but a colleague she didn't think she could get out of it. She took her own life. And, it's like, when you surround yourself with a community and you have a community of entrepreneurs and a community of CEOs and founders who feel the same way you do, who are going through the same struggles that you're feeling with, and you realize you're not alone. Sometimes it's a matter of being inside of that community that can help you pull out of those moments. And I would say, just if I was going to tell anybody something, like, it can be lonely if you're doing it alone. Or join a group of other entrepreneurs, whether it's a mastermind or a coaching program or a networking group, or there's so many that are available out there. Like, be part of those communities, because that can really, really, really help in those moments of despair.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said there. I appreciate you being transparent and vulnerable with me and our audience. I can't say enough good things for what you just said about finding community, of like-minded individuals, because as the saying goes, it can get lonely at the top, but it doesn't have to be. Right? One of my guiding principles that I try to take with me every day is that everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, especially as we talk to leaders, founders, entrepreneurs, people who interact with others in personal ways, professional ways, hundreds, sometimes thousands of times a day, I think it's just an important thing to remember, that we all deserve a little grace in that aspect, that we're all human, we're all here together, and oftentimes our growth is dependent on those around us. So let's just remember, that we're in this together.
Yeah.
And we can go far together. So yeah. Thank you for that. We'll move to close here. Real quick though, Charles, what's the most important thing that we haven't talked about today?
We covered a lot of things, which are great. I will say, probably the most important thing that we didn't talk about, who knows where the economy is going to take us here in 2026. There's a lot of discussions. Could be up, could be down. You know what? It doesn't actually matter. We're living in a world right now where it could be the best time in the world for you to be in business. I, for one, believe it literally is the best time in the world to be a strategic CEO. Because as we talked about earlier in this podcast, right now, the fastest way to not get eaten by a bear, or the easiest way to not get eaten by a bear, is to make sure that you're just running a little faster than your friend. We talked a lot about AI, and we talked about different ways about setup, sales, and scale, and so forth. When you're strategic, you have that opportunity to take an outsized share of the market. We covered a few different ways in which you could do that, but most people aren't strategic. Most people, they default to just hard work, word of mouth, and referrals, and that's the extent of their strategy. They believe the secret to success is hard work, and that's the limit to what they believe they know when it comes to running a business. I was interviewed on the NASDAQ, and the reporter said to me, I read in your book, Charlie, that you love a bad economy, and that didn't seem to make sense to me. Why do you love a bad economy? And I said, you know what? At the end of the day, there's no such thing as a bad economy, and I want your listeners to understand that. There really isn't such thing as a bad economy. They're different economies. They're up economies or down economies. They are just different economies, and different economies require different strategies. But in a bad economy, what do they teach you? They teach you to reduce your marketing, lay off team members, and then go sit into the corner, suck your thumb, and wait for the weather to pass, and then get back into the game. That's not how the strategic CEO thinks. The strategic CEO says, you know what? In those moments, I'm going to use a different strategy and I'm going to lean in. That's why some of the greatest, most successful companies in the world created that launch pad inside of quote unquote bad economies. So regardless of what 2026 does, commit to being a strategic CEO. Do the things that other people aren't doing, because the majority of your competition right now is dependent on word of mouth and referrals, and you're going to find an outsized advantage coming your way. particularly, I think next year is really going to be the year for most of us that have been in business. It could possibly be the best year we have ever seen.
Awesome. Charles, if they want to learn more, where can they find you?
Awesome. Predictableprofits.com. So again, that would be predictableprofits.com. I also have a book, Predictable Profits Playbook, if they want to learn a little bit more about some of the concepts that we talked about today. You can also follow me on social media, Charles Gaudet or Predictable Profits. And yeah, man. And if they ever want to, foundersfuel.co, if they want to check that out. Again, foundersfuel.co. That's, for anybody else that might be, looking for more focus.
Oh, yeah. I'll be checking that out for sure. Charles, I really appreciate you spending your valuable time. I know how valuable it is here with me and our audience. I know we're going to take a lot away from this conversation. So just 1,000 thanks.
Hey, together we're better.